The Yellow King stands in the darkness, giant gods leering down from above you, keenly watching your fight. They all know it's pointless. A brief clash and he falls. Now there's just the last door. Deep inside the white bunker, we stand before the monolith. A steel tower spewing out heat and electricity. When its shell cracks open, reality starts to crumble around you, and you get to see her true form. Logic, the birth of the machine god. It's not the first god we've seen born in this series. In fact, the birth of the god of fear and hunger was remarkably similar. A god in its chrysalis, lashing out as it tears off its own skin and ascends. But what is logic? Is she an ascended god like the god of fear and hunger? Or is she something different? How could someone even make such a being? And why would they? The story of logic spans hundreds of years. It's a story of conspiracies, gods, unspeakable crimes, and unfathomable technology. So, let's tell that story. On the train to Prehevil, the young woman Olivia drifts off to sleep. In her dreams, she sees a young girl in red shoes drawing a sigil on the ground, before running off. She follows, only to find herself in a workshop whose wooden walls reach high into the darkness. She's suddenly attacked by a madman who forces her to work and make cubes with strange symbols on them. The young girl is working too. It's her sister. Before long, she motions to Olivia to follow her further into the darkness. Olivia finds herself in an endless great hall filled with giant cloaked figures. She doesn't know this, but players of the first game will recognize this as the Hall of the New Gods, where new gods who have fallen out of power rest for eternity. She's transported out of the hall and summoned to the top of the tower where the smug harlequin Prehevil awaits, the moon god Rare watching serenely overhead. Prehevil explains that she's now in the festival of the silent moon god, a jubilee of cosmic proportions, the festival of Termina. 14 contestants, but only one victor. The true nature of the festival will be revealed upon reaching the tower deep in the city. Upon awakening, the train is stopped on the outskirts of Prehevil, the staff all missing, and the 14 remaining passengers all suffer the same nightmare exactly. Maybe it's more than just a bad dream. All 14 contestants had their own reasons for coming to the blasted city of Prehevil, but some are more important than others for our story today. Specifically, the 4 contestants who all dream about the horrors of the city before they arrive. Osar, the Yellow Mage, is the apprentice of the father of the Yellow Mages and living new god, Nashra. He demands Osar take him to the festival, but only tells him that important events will occur there, something truly supernatural. Karen is a journalist, and a quite determined one at that. She's long held suspicions about the Kaiser and, knowing that Prehevil was the site of mysterious experiments, rushed there when she heard his army assaulted it in the last days of the war. Olivia has the strongest connection to logic out of all the contestants. Her sister, Ryla, personally worked on logic and has now travelled to the city to stop the Kaiser from getting his hands on it. Through Olivia's backstory, we learn a lot about her missing sister. Growing up, she was intelligent, friendly, and empathetic to those around her, and success came easy to her. So much so that Olivia was envious, being wheelchair-bound due to a series of strokes she suffered while young. Ryla did so well in university that she was chosen for a special exchange program between the Bremen Empire and Eastern Union, and travelled around Europa to work on a top secret project, most likely what ended up becoming the Logic Project. At some point, Ryla was accused of treason and imprisoned. She had allegedly committed serious crimes against the Bremen Empire, but It didn't take long for her to be rescued by a group known as the Nameless Liberty Underground. Olivia discovered several letters from her sister about her intention to foil the Kaiser's plans in Prehevil, so she set out to find her. Likewise, Abella travelled to Prehevil to find Ryla too. She was actually a member of the NLU, and after Ryla's group went missing in the city, she set out to aid them in their mission. All four of these contestants, Olivia, Karen, Osar, and Abella, suffered from terrible dreams on their trip to the city. Premonitions of the horrors awaiting them. Abella, in an attempt to find some parts to fix the train, enters the bunker in the woods. She's goaded further into the bunker by another apparition of Ryla, and there she finds the first of 3 telelectroscopes, devices that connect to something called logic. Out of curiosity, she activates it, and the machine rumbles to life, but she's not sure what it does exactly. There's a corpse of a soldier on the ground, and in this situation she puts aside her morals and searches his pockets for anything that could help. Along with a key, she finds a letter.
Dear Gisela, I read this letter in great sadness. I am afraid I will have to postpone my return to your loving bosom. Even if the Great War is supposedly over, our tasks seem to be anything but. After running around following orders that would sicken every sane person who had not witnessed the horrors of war, I think I've finally started to see the red line our Kaiser has been following all along. This rotten city. It was the very thing our Kaiser strived to conquer since day one. I do not think it a coincidence that, very soon after reaching the city, the Kaiser decided to withdraw Bremen forces elsewhere and agree on terms of peace. I don't know what's so special about this miserable place, but I even heard that the Kaiser himself will be coming here in the upcoming days. Maybe, after that, I can finally return home. I hope you are able to wait for me just a while longer. Yours forever, Johnny.
The city of Prehevil was the Kaiser's goal all along. Would he really be so brazen as to start a war with the entire world just for this city? It seems the NLU was right to hurry here to interfere with his plans. By day 2, she's met up with Karen and Olivia, and they've found themselves in the city. Entering the jazz club, the Prehevil Bob, Olivia is alerted by strange blue moths in the corner. They're blue noctuids, moths from her earliest memories with their sister. Investigating where the moths were, a secret hatch to a hideout is revealed, a hideout for the NLU. Abella pretends not to recognize the hidden codes they find there, but Karen sees right through her, and she reveals her affiliation with the group. She translates the note.
Eastern Union officials from both Veronia Republic, as well as from Eastern sanctuaries, don't understand what they're giving up. I tried to emphasize the importance of Project Logic during my time with the research, yet they cannot see its true potential. Eastern Union is willing to let go of Prehevil for a very cheap price. The leaked documents say the officials are stupid enough to think they even got a good deal out of it. They don't understand what they are handing over to Kaiser on a silver platter. But Kaiser knows. I met him briefly during my scholarship at the compound all those years ago. It sounds like Kaiser knows perfectly well what the project has been building towards. In fact, from the pieces I was able to gather, it sounds like he was one of the main forces kickstarting the project, long before the Great War started and pitted Bremen and Eastern Union against each other.
Whatever Project Logic is, the NLU think it's incredibly powerful. The map has 4 locations marked on it. Abella points out that one of the locations was the bunker she visited. Perhaps Ryla can be found at one of the others. They head south through the ruins to a location marked on the map, meeting a doppelganger of Olivia. The doppelgangers are strange, and explaining them requires more context which we don't quite have yet. Past the doppelganger, forest cultists and other monstrous creatures, they find a bunker. Again, an apparition of Ryla guides them further down into the darkness. The yellow mage Osar looms out of the shadows, stuck with a strange arrow. Reluctantly, he accepts their help, and together they activate the second telelectroscope terminal. There's another coded letter here.
Eastern Union abandoned the compound like expected. They detonated explosives to cave in the railway tracks to the compound, but Bremen and Kaiser will find their way inside. We have to move now. This is our only window of opportunity. Our sources say Kaiser is already on his way to Prehevil. I'm not sure if the project is far enough, but we must hijack it ASAP. Kaiser plans to launch the system himself. It looks like the only way to stop this is to do it before him. I know how to set it up. Just mobilize whoever's in the area. We must act. Now.
The logic compound has been sealed, but the NLU will find a way in anyway. They plan to activate this mysterious device before the Kaiser can. As the party leave the bunker, they see a note on a table.
We might not reach the paradise today, not in 10 years, maybe not even in our lifetime, but know that we are laying down the foundation, the roots that will grow and bring mankind to the promised land. Take great pride in knowing this.
The scientists believe that what they were making would lead humanity to the promised land. If that was truly the case, why would the NLU try to stop Kaiser from using it at all costs? What kind of project turns its workers into religious fanatics? Whatever Project Logic is, it's undeniably powerful and world-shaking. On their way back to the city, the party gets lost in the woods and stumbles upon August's camp. He indulges them in a story, or perhaps they indulge him. An old fairy tale of a man who was destined for greatness, but who descended into madness. There is a prophecy, a man with fair hair who rivals the gods in power and beauty, one who will unite the warring states, not by the golden staff of a king, but by the power of a dozen pitchforks. The common folk love this story, although the nobles consider it to be a children's fable. Or, at least they did, until such a man appeared leading an army, the common people standing behind him, and threatened the corrupt rulers of his time. But the rulers would not take this threat idly, no, and the prophesied man would need to find the power to remake the world by any means necessary. The story starts in the early 1500s. For 700 years, the world was under the control of the new gods, known as the Fellowship, and their power was rapidly decaying. Wars, famine, and disease struck the land. The Fellowship had supposedly entered the city of the gods, Mahab, and wrestled control of the world from the feeble old gods who had abandoned humanity. Primary among the old gods was Olmir, a human who had risen to godhood in the year zero. A beacon for mankind, he paved the way for humanity's ascension. We now know that the Fellowship was merely the latest in a long procession of new gods. The new gods as a whole are humans who have reached great strength and impose their will upon the world for a short time, but no matter what, their time is limited, and before long they sink into obscurity. The true gods, the beings that shape reality, are the old gods. They have long since left our world, and their influence is slowly fading away. Now, only the crumbling powers of the Fellowship remained. While the Fellowship were the gods of the era, they stayed hidden in their golden city, and the land was in effect ruled by countless petty human kingdoms. It's here we meet Lagarde. A famed warrior and peerless commander, Lagarde led the mercenary band called the Knights of the Midnight Sun. He was so beloved and won so many battles that rumours began to spread that he was destined to unite humanity into a golden age. The nobles of the kingdom of Rondon feared his rising popularity. They slaughtered his band of warriors and had him imprisoned in the dungeons of fear and hunger. But that's not quite the full story. Lagarde secretly organised his own capture and arranged for himself to be rescued from the dungeons after enough time had passed. But why would he do this? Why would he have his own men slaughtered and undergo immense torture? Lagarde had a grand vision for humanity. His military campaigns, violence, looting, and deceit were all in service of this plan. He saw the decay and weakness of the Fellowship and wanted to remake himself into something greater, something that could make a lasting impact. He wanted to become a second Allmere, a second true man-god. And the way he planned to do this was to fully embody the aspects of each of the ruling new gods. For Francois the Dominating, he led his vicious and unbreakable military campaigns. For Nilvan the Endless, he visited her in his dreams, and together they soared through the clouds. For Valtiel the Enlightened, he achieved enlightenment by meditating on the cube of the depths. And finally, to reach true torment like Ron Chambara, he had himself sent to the dungeons of fear and hunger, and tortured horribly. By doing this, he hoped to become greater than the Fellowship, to ascend to the level of Allmere. But he failed. In order to reach his goal, Lagarde had become the very thing he claimed to hate, a violent megalomaniac putting his own goals ahead of the people he sought to protect. He failed in his plan of becoming a true god for humanity. In fact, there was no chance he could become the saviour he wished to be. But despite his failure, there was a new hope for humanity born in the darkness. The god of fear and hunger, a being as strong as Allmere, was created from his daughter and completely shook the foundations of the world. Her birth gives us insight into how a human can truly become a god. The little girl was a child of Nilvan, the Endless, and Lagarde. She was steeped in darkness, misery, and hunger her entire life, before being brought to the corpse of the old god known as the God of the Depths, where her ascension took place. Allmere's story is similar, and the god whose place he took over was the sun god. This process was a long-lost secret to humanity, and Lagarde had no chance to take the power he wanted. But what did happen to Lagarde, down in the darkness of the dungeon? There is a long-running question about whether or not Lagarde became a new god during his time in the dungeon. The main contention is, in Termina, if you use the spell Rot on him during the fight, his skin is removed, an effect that doesn't occur in any other fight when using this spell. His appearance is similar to what he looks like in Darce's S ending from the first game, where Lagarde is dead and she resurrects him using an ancient, secret spell known as the Rebirth of the Beloved. He emerges from his own skin like a cocoon, becoming a bloodthirsty ghoul. This obvious visual connection has led many to believe that the Yellow King we meet in Termina isn't actually a new god at all, but instead just a rebirthed monster similar to, but not quite the same, as a sulfur cultist. This is an attractive idea because it also means that it's easy to line up the endings from the first game. Enki, Darce, and Ragnvalda all get their S endings, and Kahara gets ending A and takes the girl to the depths to ascend into the god of fear and hunger. It's very neat. However, Darce's S ending isn't the only reason Lagarde could have to have his skin removed. New gods that spend a lot of time in the void, like Lagarde did, have their skins scoured off. The blights we see in the void are the new gods of the lizardmen, as confirmed in the museum in Termina, and they all appear to be skinless, as do the other creatures we see there. Furthermore, after the ritual of rebirth, Lagarde is described as a bloodthirsty ghoul. This doesn't quite align with how Lagarde behaves in Termina, and definitely not with his plans to build logic. It would also be strange for Lagarde, after going through rebirth, to style himself in an identical manner to his new god form, which simply doesn't exist in Darce's S ending. In the discussions in the bunker, Lagarde references a conversation he has with Nashra if you have both in your party when sitting on the Golden Throne. Because of all this, I suspect that Lagarde did become a new god while in the dungeons of fear and hunger. The birth of the god of fear and hunger shook the world to its core. Her worship spread like wildfire, inflicting misery deep into the soul of the humanity, but creating stronger bonds and drive than the people had ever known before. Importantly, it was common knowledge that the god of fear and hunger was born of a mere child, and humanity loved her like they loved Allmere, as a human god to shepherd them through the darkness. She didn't represent the interests of the old gods, those cruel and indifferent overlords watching us from a distance. but the interests of humanity. With that came its own cruelty, yes, but it was a human cruelty, a knowable cruelty. But it wasn't Lagarde. He had failed to become the leader of humanity he had hoped to. Eventually he left the dungeons, but his emergence was overshadowed entirely by the birth of the god of fear and hunger. His dreams snatched away and the prophecy unfulfilled, the man spiraled into madness, his cruelty growing. It grew so much that he became known as the Yellow King of Madness. He was so obsessed with the prophecies surrounding himself that he could not rest until they were fulfilled, and wandered the earth trying to do just that. How many lives would be ruined by his endless search for the Promised Land? Perhaps realizing the futility of his new conquests, Lagarde retreated to the shadows of history. There's only fables and myths about what happened during this time. Along with the grand hall of the new gods, he began pulling the strings behind the scenes to steer the development of humanity in the direction he wanted. The exact time he began enlisting help to build logic isn't clear. The Eastern Sanctuaries were likely the first group to begin work, as the architecture and technology would take decades of planning. Next would be securing the location. Where else but that cursed and ancient city of Prehevil? In 1866, one of the logic bunkers was constructed under the church, with the upper levels being remodelled at the same time. Lagarde had himself put into the stained glass windows front and centre, once again chasing the glory of Ulmir. Decades pass while the project slowly grinds to completion. The world erupts into a massive war, the First Great War, allegedly due to the meddlings of the secretive new gods. Despite this, the logic project continues unhindered. There's several years of peace after the First Great War, but this isn't to last. The Eastern Sanctuaries, the nation Lagarde had manipulated into constructing logic, allies with the Varonia Republic, and they become known as the Eastern Union. As a counterweight, the Bremen Empire undergoes a series of political upheavals, the lower classes toppling their nobles. Before long, a mysterious and charismatic man known as Kaiser takes over Bremen as its chancellor, and war breaks out between them and the Eastern Union.
The Midnight Gazette, January 31st, 1936. Appointment of Kaiser as Bremen Chancellor has been made official today. In approximately 14 years, Kaiser has brought into being the greatest popular movement Bremen has ever seen. In fact, one of the greatest that history registers. This mysterious man, who seems to remain in secrecy under his now trademark hood, rose to popularity seemingly out of nowhere. But just witnessing him giving one of his famous speeches to masses makes it obvious why both the high and low class fell under his charms. Kaiser's energy is a sight to behold. In a short amount of time, Kaiser has managed to unite the Midwestern nations under the flag of Bremen. He formed the special troops, the marching men of the Knight's Day, which effectively have been expanding the Bremen reign at a rapid rate. A rate that has made the leaders of the Eastern Union worried. Where these turns take the world cannot be foreseen. His acts can very well be described as vile and monstrous, but only future history can tell if his means justify the end.
The Second Great War turns the continent of Europa into a meat grinder for the second time in decades. Despite this, the logic project continues unhindered. The final days of the war close in, and the Kaiser's special battalion known as the Marching Men of the Knight's Day capture the secluded city of Prehevil. Immediately after they take the city, the Kaiser offers peace talks to the Eastern Union, making it clear that the city was his goal all along.
The Midnight Gazette, September 17th, 1942. The formation of the Marching Men of the Knight's Day marked the day Europa officially jumped the shark. There are conflicting stories as to whether the Bremen army has truly succumbed to the horrors the rumors speak of, but it is clear as a day that something vile is brewing under that black and yellow banner of Kaiser's Bremen, especially the campaigns that took place in the area of Bohemia. Kaiser pursued this area with such vigor that it is without a question his endgame. It is hardly a coincidence that Kaiser is opening up the talks about the peace treaty right after his Bremen pig occupy Prehevil, the capital of Bohemia. The Kingdom of Rondon and allied forces suspect that this whole Bremen ambition is directly linked to the advanced electronic network experiments the Eastern Union has been conducting in the area. It is beyond me how the masses fail to see through these plans. Instead, they give credence to Kaiser's madness and place more trust in his perversions than logic. There are no rational answers to the irrational ideologies which Kaiser brings to the table.
A week before the Khazar's men arrived in the city, an ancient and terrible presence appeared above. The trickster moon god, Rare. The pale green light reflected off his surface burns the skin and scours the mind of anybody caught in its glare. 3 days under his gaze sends anybody mad, transforming them into monsters. The citizens of Prehevil had tried to shelter indoors and underground, but it only slowed the process. Many of the citizens had begun tearing each other apart. Amidst the chaos and agony, there was laughter. Clowns frolicked and performed while running through the streets, reveling in the bloodshed. Overseeing it all, high atop the tower stood the smug harlequin, Percale. The head of the cult of Sulphur, he used the powers of his tortured god to bind Rare in place and turn the city of Prehevil underneath into a carnival of blood. The Bremen army entered the city to see them gone mad. They shelled and gunned their way through the western end, unaware that the madness would start afflicting them, too. They quickly excavated a path to the white bunker through the museum above it, sheltered within while awaiting the Kaiser. Some scouts were sent out to turn on the teleelectroscopes required to connect logic to the rest of the world, but they didn't return. When the Kaiser finally arrived, it was too late. He was unable to turn on the teleelectroscopes for fear of his own life. His plan had failed. He visits the moon tower in the heart of Prehevil, perhaps to confront the sulphur cult head-on, but retreats to the white bunker with the remainder of his men. And there, he waits. The contestants have varying levels of knowledge about the Kaiser. Most only know him, if at all, as the megalomaniac dictator of the Bremen Empire. Karen has a particular grudge against him, as her father was killed in the initial social unrest he provoked when she was young, but her strong sense of justice meant she knew something was off about him regardless. It's August who knows the truth about this mysterious figure. A truth so outlandish it sounds like a fairy tale. The Kaiser was a man known as the Yellow King, who wasn't just named after the Yellow King of Madness from history, but was indeed the same man. The same man who led the Knights of the Midnight Sun and tried to become a god himself. Once again, he heads an army, and once again is trying to lead humanity to the Promised Land. Would this be the time he succeeds? When they return to the city, the party stops at the local newspaper office to see if there's any information there. After poking around the area for a little bit, they stumble upon a hidden garden and another apparition of Ryla. She left behind a pendant there, one half of a full butterfly necklace. Olivia has the other half, and they fit together neatly. Two halves of the whole, back together again. The final terminal is hidden inside the catacombs-like sewers. Deep down in ancient caves, they find the bunker being guarded by a giant blue wolf. They hold her off barely until the last minute their fellow contestant August jumps in to save them. He apologises. The wolf is an old family friend. It's not explained right now, but August is guarding the bunkers to hunt the Kaiser. It's even his arrows that pierced Osar, August likely confusing him with the signature yellow robes of his target in the darkness of the bunker. The party continue into the third and final bunker, guided again by the blue moths. It's here they find another doppelganger, Tanaka, although thankfully he's not violent if left alone, just strange. They activate the terminal. Whatever they were doing is complete, and they have only one last location to visit, deep in the heart of the city. After some other odds and ends, the party finally reaches their destination given to them by Perkele, the tower. By sheer luck, they see the Kaiser at the base of the tower, but before they can say anything, a Bremen soldier confronts him. Just as quickly, the man is cut down, and the party are too shocked to say anything as the Kaiser walks away. The party aid the man and bring him back to the train. When his wounds were stabilised, the man introduces himself as Pav, a Bremen officer and fellow contestant. He was hunting the Kaiser for many years to make him pay for killing his family and village when he was younger, but even after years of preparation, he couldn't match the strength of the Yellow King. And now he's going to die from his wounds or die from the moon, having failed his only purpose in life. The party rest and regroup overnight. The next day, on the final day of the festival, Karen, Abella, Osar, and Olivia set out from the train to finally find Ryla and find the truth of what's happening to Prehevil. Their final target was the museum, the last mark on the map. The townsfolk have been slowly mutating over the course of the festival, and the streets in the heart of the city are teeming with hard-shelled, spear-wielding monsters. Chaos and blood still fill the streets as the moon leers overhead. Outside the museum, the noises of partying within can be heard. The moment they step inside, however, it's deathly silent. The museum is filled with partygoers, but no sound comes out of their mouths. It's like they're puppets pantomiming a party. A butler greets them at the door, giving them vital clues to navigate this puzzling place. It's not the first time we've seen this man. He appears in the mayor's manor when the new mayor arrives, giving us a careful warning about how to navigate that situation too. Reality in the museum is bent and twisted, infinitely looping back on itself. This place is no longer normal, and the party struggles not to get lost in the maze. The museum is hosting a display of artifacts, and not just any artifacts, but ones taken from the city of the gods, Mahab. Statues, figurines, reliefs, totems, and more from that golden city deep underground. Mahab was outside human reality, the pinnacle of man's reach, and now it's been dragged back into our reality by human hands and worn like a skin. With the butler's help, the party managed to open the door leading to the excavations in the ballroom. Since the Eastern Union collapsed the train tunnel leading to the main entrance of the White Bunker, the Bremen needed a new way in, and the simplest way was to dig straight down. They stand before the entrance of the enormous gates of the White Bunker. A final activation of a terminal, and the doors slide open. The party enter. The doors slam shut. They're never opening again. The White Bunker is now their tomb. Close to the entrance, the party finds a room that looks remarkably similar to the workshop they were dragged into while dreaming on the train. It was only 3 days earlier, but it felt like a lifetime. A cave-in blocks the path here, fresh corpses crushed under the rocks. This is likely the alternative path Ryla took to get into the bunker before the Kaiser's army arrived to the city, and unfortunately, the rest of her team seems to have been caught when they collapsed the path. The party continue along the other direction into the bunker. They find a note on one of the desks.
The modern science and medicine is still limited in this subject. There is a debate if science will ever be capable of calculating the necessary amounts of information. Human mind and soul, after all, are so complex that it is not quantifiable by any computer. Thus, it might not be possible to replace the logic, even as the technology advances in coming decades. Likewise, it is also impossible for human mind to calculate the mathematical formulas in a conscious state. That is why it's necessary for the subject to be in a lucid dreaming state at all times. That is when both conscious and unconscious mind are activated. That is when the processing power of the human mind is at its fullest potential. The subject will be hooked to the telelectroscope. The engine and the subject form the logic together. The electronic signals that occur in the subject's brain are converted to ones and zeros, blurring the line between a human and a machine.
A person connected to a machine. It sounds like nonsense, but after everything they've seen so far, there are still soldiers lurking in the darkness of the White Bunker. They are mindless, silent, and fiercely protective, throwing themselves entirely into stopping the party. The scenery of the bunker changes and shifts as the party gets deeper, with gargantuan arms reaching out from the heart. A strange creature, a hybrid of a man, crow, snake, and other things, rests half dead. One final, brutal fight against the last remaining soldiers almost ends the party, but they barely survive the onslaught. The soldiers, at least the ones still with their wits, know their time has come. There's only time for one last party before their time is at an end. Finally, the darkness beckons. They're back at the Great Hall, the new gods. It seems they agree. The time has come. The old era is about to be torn down, and a new world will spring forth. A single door sits in the darkness, and the Kaiser, the Yellow King, Lagarde, sits patiently beside it. The machine god is being born, he says. It's all led to this. Despite his burning ambition to be the one true god of humanity for these hundreds of years, he knows he's truly lost now. The honour is not now, or was it ever, meant for him. Lagarde has finally accepted that his role is not to be a saviour of humanity, but to be the creator of one. He explains that it was always man's goal, to rival the power of the old gods, but that this quest was a trap. Lagarde thought for a long time that he would be the one to lead humanity to the promised land, but that chaos of reality denied him this many times over. Instead of working within the paradigm determined by the old gods, he would embrace the chaos to change the endless cycle of time into a spiral, learning and growing each time until humanity could finally break free. The new gods, despite knowing they were trapped in the same cycles of time, could never break free because they felt the only power they could claim was that which the old gods had given them. Humanity needed to make something new. After hundreds of years of cyclical violence, did Lagarde manage to break humanity out of it, to create a new god. Not one that borrows from the power of the old gods, like Ormir and the god of fear and hunger did, but something that is born from humanity. The machine god. The only human god. Humanity taking charge of its own fate, with its own hands. As a joint conscience, they would ascend. But before he even arrived in Prehevil, logic was activated. The throne was sealed, and Lagarde was cheated out of his crown once again. Lagarde and his cohort will be left forgotten in the past. After losing to fate's tricks multiple times, he's finally made peace with his role. Lagarde may not have taken the throne, but he can still protect it. Logic's not ready yet. The breath of the machine god is still frail. He cannot let the party interfere with its very last steps. Once he kills them, he says, they'll be the first to enter the promised land. It's truly an honour. The fight against the demigod is brutal, swift, and violent. But by some miracle, the party best him. He slumps back into his chair, well and truly defeated. Then, surprisingly, he melts into a puddle and soaks into the ground. Nashra explains that this is a blood ritual, likely the same one that Father Domek tried to use to resurrect himself in the church. Who knows where Lagarde could be now? But at least he's not here. The final barrier out of the way, the party open the door. The monolith rises before them, spewing heat and electricity, surrounded by blue moths. Logic awaits them. The party hold themselves against the spasms of the god's birth, eventually cracking its shell. When they do, reality crashes around them and they see the truth. Logic is Ryla, and Ryla is logic. The raw power of this god melts reality away, strips the lies bare, and remakes truth. The party managed to withstand the throes of her birth, and reality begins to stabilize again. The monolith cracks open, blinding green light shining from within. Ryla is locked inside the metal tomb of the machine god, and she is its heart.
The conscience of consensus. Just an avatar for the stream of thought. Join me in the promised land.
Sitting atop a globe, holding the raw power of creation and destruction in her hands, Logic is a new sun god. She's not an ascended god, a new god, or an old god. She is an entirely new paradigm. In clear view, we see a cube with Venushka's symbol crossed out embedded in Logic. We've seen a cube before, one that Lagarde owned long ago, the Cube of the Depths. Despite its name, it wasn't actually owned by the god of the depths, that's just where it was found. When Lagarde was trying to embody all of the Fellowship to ascend higher than them, he achieved enlightenment by meditating upon this cube. Venushka is the child of Grogoroth and Sylvian, the balance of life and death, of reality and idea, of waking and of sleeping. Venushka is not just a god of nature, it is a god of being one with the universe, for it encapsulates it entirely. Once a person truly understands their place in the divine hierarchy, they can see the way to move higher within it. Venushka, like its counterpart Olmir, offers humanity the opportunity to ascend and claim more power. They just have to submit. The Book of Enlightenment, which shows the meditating god, makes you feel as if you are ascending higher and you gain a better understanding of yourself. The link between your mind and body has started its deterioration. So what would attaching it to Logic do? Logic is a being of contradictions. She is awake and asleep, human and machine. She allows humanity to achieve oneness, to ascend as one. But instead of requiring submission and understanding one's place in the hierarchy, it is given freely to all of humanity. She has brute force human ascension. That's why the Venushka symbol on the cube is crossed out. She has achieved the same goal, but ignored the message of Venushka. Instead of allowing humanity to grow slowly through spirituality, she forces it through cold, hard logic. Olivia's sister was calling out to them the entire time. The nascent god was lucid dreaming, and being so strong, her dreams were spilling into reality. She would guide the party through the city, even tried to warn them ahead of time through their own dreams, but why would she do this? Ryla is Logic, and Logic is Ryla. Ryla loved her sister dearly. She is one half of the whole, and Olivia the other half. The two pieces are destined to join together again, forever. Ryla used the power of Logic to try and pull Olivia straight to her from the train, but the dark powers of the Sulphur Cult interfered and forced them to join in their wicked games. She wanted to ascend higher together with her sister. The two halves reunited into a whole again.
Olivia, join me. I found a way for us to
A newborn god, deep in the darkness, lashing out against the people it cares for most. A god that just wants a connection. A human god, destined to change humanity and tasked with leading them to the promised land. It's a story we've heard before. Is this the time it's going to be true? Did Lagarde manage to bend the spiral enough that humanity can break the cycle? The party falls into the artificial green hue. They're bathed in love and hope. But shapes swim into view, emerging from the fog. It's a cage, a human cage. The green hue is where the old gods were born and where they dwell. When they interact with the human reality, the forms they are take mere approximations of what the god truly is. They are primordial, pure ideas. Every form of godhood and magic was derived from this force. The birth of logic is the birth of the artificial green hue, where human souls will dwell in love and hope for eternity. What gods and what magic will be born from this? What shackles will be forged with this new green hue? Abella, Karen, Osar, and Olivia failed to return from the White Bunker. The festival ends, and Rhea is gone. The remaining contestants leave Prehevil on the train, like waking up from a bad dream. That's a nice story, isn't it? But it leaves us a few questions to try and answer. First, let's summarise what's happened so far. Lagarde, having failed to become a second Olmir to lead humanity to endless peace, allies with the new gods and hides in the shadows, manipulating world events. He manipulates the Eastern Sanctuaries, later Eastern Union, into building the Logic Project, a machine that will allow him to make himself into a god outside of the old power structures. But before he can do that, Ryla sneaks into the facility and enters the machine herself, becoming a god of hope and empathy. She uses her new powers to try and bring her sister to her, but the Sulphur Cult interfere and force the people on the train to take part in their bloody festival. Olivia, Osar, Karen, and Abella activate the teleelectroscopes and open the White Bunker, fighting their way to the newborn god and entering the Promised Land. Something doesn't quite make sense here. Lagarde orchestrated both world wars as well as countless other bloodbaths, but strangely claims to be altruistic and doing it to let humanity flourish. In fact, we know he's telling the truth, because the point of logic is explicitly to lead humanity to the Promised Land and to let them ascend as gods as one. So, that suggests that the mass slaughters perpetrated by Lagarde over the years was part of the goal, but it sounds contradictory. Well, it all comes back to sulphur. To explain, let's answer another question first. Why was logic built in Prehevil? Nothing is explicitly said, or frankly even suggested, about why Prehevil was chosen for a location to build logic. A common theory is that since logic operates on multiple layers of reality, it's better to build it in a location where the boundaries between those layers are weak. The festival breaks down those boundaries, making this the perfect time and place for a project like this. But the festival is said to move around, so why specifically Prehevil? We had to consider what makes Prehevil special. First and foremost, their ancient aptitude for astronomy. The moon god Rhea doesn't talk to humans, but the festival is likened to a natural event, and the moon is traditionally associated with strict astronomical time schedules, so it stands to reason that, if one knew how to look, the festival could be predicted. In fact, Father Donovan even knew it was coming beforehand. Rhea's presence marks the festival, greatly weakening the boundaries at the edge of reality. We're not told what Rhea's sigil usually does, but it definitely isn't supposed to make one travel to a realm of darkness, what we call Rhea's realm. It's here one could supposedly see the true nature of things. We can even see the face of the moon god himself looking down upon the city, where, in reality, it's just a rock in space. The backwater city of Prehevil offers another benefit for Lagarde. Simply put, it's an out-of-the-way location where the major world powers aren't looking too closely and is easy to take over. It's on the edge of Eastern Union territory and is easily conquered in a fast military push when it's finally time to activate logic. If logic somehow went wrong, well, wiping Prehevil off the map wouldn't be a big deal in the long run. And the city provided a secluded location full of easily controlled aristocracy used to keeping secrets. This brings us to the next reason, and perhaps the most important one. Prehevil is the heart of sulfur worship. We won't get into the specifics of the relation between Ulmir and sulfur here, I have 2 full videos about it, but they can be thought of as 2 sides of the same coin. Lagarde is mimicking the story of Ulmir, and the story of Ulmir is the story of sulfur. Because sulfur's presence is most strongly felt in Prehevil, he would be naturally drawn to it. Lagarde knows full well about sulfur and his worship in the ancient city, and is happily working with his worshippers. One thing we know about sulfur is that he likes blood and suffering. Lagarde and the new gods turning Europa into a giant bloodbath twice in so many decades, all while they're building a god machine in the heart of sulfur worship, is not a coincidence. Prehevil has a long-standing connection to sulfur. Not only do the statues in the city betray a tradition of worship, but the pit traps in the forest betray an even older practice. They're said to have been used to sacrifice maidens in ancient times, but we see similar pits in the church basement, still very much in use. The sulfur cult has also been controlling the festival for a very long period too, although how long isn't clear, and the city of Prehevil has an almost equally strong connection to the mysterious moon god. The violence of sulfur is integral to the birth of logic, despite how contradictory it sounds. Humanity has lived through endless cycles of violence throughout the ages, and the Great Wars were one desperate push by Lagarde to finally break that cycle. As elaborated in my previous video, it's likely that the blood rituals of sulfur are a long-running process to resurrect the dead god, and logic being built here seems like it's trying to hijack that energy to kickstart the machine god instead. Perhaps not the energy of the god, but maybe the souls under his control. Logic absorbs souls, as is clear from the ending. In fact, the artificial green hue, the new man-made afterlife, seems to be constructed from human souls. But it's worth clarifying what logic is exactly before we go on. The physical aspects of logic are discussed in notes from the scientists who worked on the machine. The name logic refers to all the parts of the machine working in tandem, but we can break it into 3 distinct parts. The teleelectroscopes are how logic sees out into the world and spreads her influence. They are, in effect, an early kind of internet and designed to send vast amounts of electronic signals along their cables. It documents and extracts information from the humans connected to it, eventually creating virtual simulacrums of these people. It is designed to link the minds and consciousness of all humanity together. The monolith is the heart of logic, and the word logic is often used to describe just this part. All data is processed through the monolith and stored, and it provides people with knowledge as needed. A human is required to operate this part because the system is designed to process human souls, which cannot be quantified by computers. But the vast amount of mathematical processes require the computational power of machines to supplement. The human operator is kept in a lucid dreaming state, to keep both the conscious and unconscious mind working and processing together. Thus, machine and human working together allow for the machine god to be born. Code and the human mind working in tandem to elevate humanity. The artificial green hue is the last and most mysterious part of logic. It's described as the promised land and is treated as an afterlife, but the interesting thing is the previous green hue isn't ever said to be an afterlife. Humans whose souls enter the artificial green hue are filled with love and hope, but we can see that it's perhaps just another cage like the one Lagarde spent so long working to free humanity from. Much of the mystery of the artificial green hue comes from the fact that we simply don't know much about the original. It's a place where pure idea exists, where the old gods come from, and even being in its presence tends to send humans mad, give them great powers, or both. Is this the same as the artificial one? Will it give birth to a new variety of god, purely human gods of the upcoming electronic age? Will Olivia and the other members of the party perhaps be given places in a new pantheon? Logic seems to be a recreation of the sun god, and what is a king without nobles? But why these four? Why Olivia, Osar, Karen, and Abella? Well, Olivia is obvious. She's Ryla's sister, and the entire game seems to have started due to Logic trying to summon her. She's also the only person with a unique ending on this route, so if anybody activates Logic, it's probably her. Well, how about the others? Abella is also an easy one. Not only does she enter the first bunker with the teleelectroscope terminal, and would likely mess with it due to her personality, she's also a member of the NLU and can decode the letters and find the hidden map showing the bunker locations. Karen has the drive to find the Bremen army's secret reason for conquering Prehevil, and will stop at nothing to discover it. Her knowledge of the Bremen army and the NLU will come in handy on their mission. Logic is also explicitly interested in her. Karen's likeness is used in the molded apartments on the TV, which is almost certainly Logic's influence, which we'll discuss soon. Osar is the only member of the contestants who came to Prehevil because he heard a party was happening, and is the most sensitive to the paranormal. In his opening, he's summoned from across the continent by Nashra, and then Logic does the same thing. His mentor doesn't tell him much, but he directs him to the teleelectroscope terminal to try and activate it, but his lack of knowledge of technology means he relies on the others for help. Not only do all four have an explicit interest in Logic, but they're also the only four contestants who have premonitions in their dreams ever since they started their journey. It's likely that, if there are four canon contestants who activate Logic, it'll be these four. Although, what the future holds for Logic is still uncertain. We can't know what impact Logic will have on the world yet, but we can gather hints based on what we see and read during Termina. We know that Logic has influence over people's minds in some fashion, from the dream she was inflicting on the party, but it goes further than that. In Rare's realm, strange hands are pulling together the wooden towers. Similar hands, albeit much larger, stretch outwards from the heart of Logic when travelling through the white bunker, suggesting she was constructing the wooden areas. Marina and Levi say the slums of Old Town are very new, and they're the same style of building. Logic has been influencing the minds of the citizens to build for her, and it's breaching into reality too. Despite not being fully activated yet, Logic's influence is still strong enough in the city for her to cause visions. The holograms always guide the player to activate Logic, such as towards the teleelectroscope terminals, to the secret map underneath the Prehevil Bob, and inside the bunkers. One does appear with a butterfly pendant too, and this was to help Olivia achieve her own goals. The first hologram we see in the game is on the train, in the dream sequence. It begins with Ryla carving a sigil of protection on the ground, the same that the player can with Marina's skill warding sigil, and beckoning the contestants to follow her into the darkness, to a location that we discover later is in the White Bunker. She brings them to the Hall of the New Gods, which is right outside her chamber, but the contestant is pulled away by Percolate. Upon entering and leaving these locations, a heavy static effect is played. Both this and the holograms invoking static suggest it's a motif of the machine god's influence. The most obvious usage of this is in the television in the molded apartments. Upon viewing it for the first time, it shows a brief segment by Karen about a mass murder that took place in the building, giving vital clues to progress. But as Karen reveals, that isn't her on the screen. She's never been to Prehevil before. The program is marked by a heavy static, suggesting Logic's hand, but how could Logic make a nearly perfect simulation of Karen? The answer is found in a document called Teleelectroscope and Logic, found in the White Bunker. It details the future plans of Logic as a kind of internet where people will prefer to interact with each other, including fake friends who exist in the walls. Logic appears to be able to make full simulacrums of humans, and we know Logic has an interest in Karen since before the festival. These fake friends are the likely explanation for the doppelgangers too. They are mostly found on paths leading to or inside of teleelectroscope bunkers. Whether the contestants are the only targets for simulation by logic, or the other simulations are so good we can't tell, isn't elaborated on. In fact, the doppelgangers have very little information about them, so unfortunately, it's hard to say anything definitive. The Poe is another creature I suspect to be a creation of logic. Poe appears out of radios with a long burst of static. It holds a picture frame around itself, suggesting a connection to the museum. It's also in this location where it is most aggressive. The interesting thing is that Poe's single eye and desire for souls suggest a connection to the sulfur god, which isn't the only connection between logic and sulfur. In the shopping district of the city, there's a clothing store with a dark basement where one can find this thing. The irrational obelisk is a completely unexplained entity that sends the contestants mad if they try to fight it. It's very odd. For one, Ryla's dress and shoes can be found upstairs. The shirts that the irrational obelisk wears are in the same style as the neighbours, and finally, the name is even a reverse of logic. The irrational obelisk versus the logic monolith. What exactly all this means is hard to say. The neighbours are linked to the sulfur god because of their infesting the sulfur apartments and sharing the same snake tongue as the tortured god. Is the obelisk some kind of sulfuric reflection of logic? Or perhaps logic is making a simulation of sulfur? Ryla's clothes suggest a shedding to reveal the truth. Was logic supposed to be a rebirth of sulfur? Or is it just that logic has stolen the power from the tortured god? There are some other minor occurrences that have logic influence too. When performing a coin flip in battle, there is a very slight static played on screen, suggesting she's helping the player out. The butler that helps the player out in the Mayor's Manor and Museum is likely under the influence of logic, as he gives vital clues to actually find the white bunker. Logic copies people and information, and can influence events to help people perform tasks. The papers about logic say it's designed to be a kind of internet, to centralize all information and link humanity together. Knowing all this, what can we say about the future of logic? When logic is activated, the festival ends. And that's it. There's no postscript telling us what the surviving contestants do with their lives. There's no explanation as to why activating logic ends the festival, and we're not told what logic does next. So we have to extrapolate from what we know. One burning question is, why does the festival end when logic is activated? It's probably to do with how the green hue interacts with human reality. The old gods are entities inside the green hue but reach down to interact with our reality. Imagine a 3D shape moving through a 2D plane, and that's similar to how the old gods work. But how the old gods manifest in our reality is shaped by our perception of the ideas they represent. In the 1940s, humanity thinks the moon god Re is just a big hunk of rock floating in space, so that's how he appears. When the contestants enter the festival and the dream, they move one step up the chain and closer to the green hue, so Re appears closer to his true form. However, humanity can't possibly comprehend the real true form of the old gods. Grogroth tries to show you his in ending Beer the first game, but it shorts out the human mind. Although, we can get closer to it. All this to say, because logic gathers human consciousness together, perhaps it can interfere with the connection between humans and the old gods, so they can't interact with our reality anymore. Perhaps the birth of logic severed the connection between humans and the green hue entirely, like a shield around our reality. Or perhaps it's more mundane than rewriting the divine hierarchy in an instant. Logic clearly had a wide influence over the city of Prehevil in a nascent state. The whole city had slipped into a half-dreaming phase, and it's perhaps that allowed the festival to run uninhibited. Now that logic is fully activated, she could have snapped the whole city awake and freed the remaining contestants. Another option is that logic, taking Sulphur's power, now has dominion over Rhea herself. The Sulphur cult extended the festival longer than it should have gone for, using the power of their tortured god. If logic has snatched his power, then it's reasonable to think that the Sulphur cult are powerless to bind the moon god any longer, and he could have just drifted away. Whatever the case, it's clear that logic has interfered with the great chain of being. Instead of human souls going to Mahab when they die, they're now ensnared in logic's circuits. The artificial green hue is an afterlife, and the souls will be used to further Logic's powers. Will this be enough to take the place of the old gods? Lagarde and his scientists definitely thought so. But Lagarde's plans had a habit of not working out exactly how he wanted. We do know that Logic will be a major force in the future. She will shake humanity to its core. The final question involving Logic is, did it work? Hundreds of years of planning for Lagarde, a grand scheme to elevate the entirety of humanity past its limits. Now, the machine god is turned on. The computers were to life. And all we can do now is wait. Thank you very much for watching. I'd like to thank the people who collaborated with me on this project. The fellow VTubers who provided voices for this video were Carmine, who played the scientists, Marcus, the soldiers, Cooper, who played Karen, and Grimmy, who played Ryla. The Ryla art was provided by Golthrax, and the Lagarde art was provided by the amazing Procreations. And finally, thank you all bonesjones for some additional footage. The links for all of them will be in the description, so make sure to check them out. And I'd like to thank Miro for making these wonderful and inspiring games. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron. Not only do you help make more content like this, you can get your name in the credits, get access to video scripts, and see videos a week earlier than the public. Thank you very much to everybody who's supported so far. My name's More They Do, and I'll see you next time.